essential learning resources to help you develop your outdoor learning and your outdoor local spaces. So my name is Christina and I'm a tutor with the Field Studies Council based out at Millport. Thankfully we have slightly better weather than we did yesterday, and this is part of the Be Wild project funded by Heritage National Lottery. So the Field Studies Council is an environmental education charity that is aiming to connect everyone with the environment to help them appreciate its benefits, but also to learn how to protect it as well. So this week I'm going to be taking you through a range of sessions to hopefully give you some inspiration for how to develop your outdoor learning and how to use your local outdoor spaces with your young people. So whether you are in the wilderness or whether you're in the middle of a city, the outdoors is still a fantastic location to use with young people to help their learning and help their personal development and growth, help build their confidence, but also just for a bit of good old-fashioned fun as well. And particularly in the current circumstances that we find ourselves in, there really is no better time to use your outdoor spaces with young people and get them connecting with their environment. So each session will have an overall theme that will then be jam-packed full of different activities and session ideas, tools and resources that you can use to help facilitate your outdoor learning. But we'll also be discussing ways that you might adapt the sessions to suit different age groups, different environments, and we'll also be discussing group management techniques and health and safety as well. So lots to get done. How each session will work is you'll have a live introduction from me where I'll be kind of setting the scene and letting you know what's to come. I'll then be introducing our main video and you'll then be brought back to me live and where I'll be answering some of your questions. So you can submit questions at any point via email to our email address, which is questions@field-studies-council.org, and I'll do my best to answer those at the end of the session. So if you joined us yesterday, you'll have partaked in our first session, Marvellous Mammals. Today we're going to be looking at the world on our doorstep, and where we're going to be looking at a variety of different activities you can use in any location, and we'll be looking at skills like map reading, navigation and orienteering. Tomorrow we'll be exploring the world of Minibeasts, so we'll be looking at invertebrates and insects and activities that you can develop around them. On Thursday, we're going to be visiting the coast and the rocky shore. We're going to be looking at activities we can do around a coastline, although those will also be applicable to freshwater environments as well. And then finally, on Friday, we're going to be looking at some bushcraft and wilderness skills. So lots of things packed in there. I hope you guys are looking forward to it. So without further ado, we'll get started with our second session, the world on our doorstep. So what we're going to be looking at in this session, first of all, we're going to have a little bit of a discussion as to how you can find spaces local to use for outdoor learning. And thinking about some of the amazing locations that we have here in Scotland, because we are in a brilliant place for outdoor learning. After that, we're going to delve into map reading and navigation skills. So we're going to be looking at how to use a map, how to use a key, a scale bar, and also look at how to use a grid reference and how to take a bearing, and how you might use these skills with young people. We'll then also be talking about how you might generate your own orienteering course to use with young people and how you might adapt it slightly to suit different age groups. And then finally, we'll kind of wrap up with a little suite of mini activities that can help young people connect with a new environment, a new place. But you as outdoor leaders can almost have as a little pack in your rucksack that you can take with you whenever you do outdoor learning. And you can use any of these activities whenever you need to, essentially. So that's what we've got planned for today. But let's start off, first of all, by thinking about some of the amazing locations that we have here in Scotland that can be used for outdoor learning. So sometimes it's very easy to think that, the grass is greener on the other side and that your local space maybe doesn't have locations for outdoor learning with young people. But I can guarantee you this absolutely couldn't be further from the truth. We in Scotland have an absolute treasure trove of beautiful locations and historical monuments and areas in the outdoors that are fantastic to use with young people. It really doesn't matter if you are in a city or if you're out in the countryside. There are fantastic locations that you can make use of for development with young people. And the beauty is with Scotland is that many of them are not just out in the wilderness, many of them are actually within our cities or right on the outskirts as well. So there's loads and loads of brilliant locations to use. We have rivers, we've got parks, we've got monuments, and we've got the coastline is never really that far away from us. We've got forests and heathland and moorland. There's so many opportunities out there to use. And the great thing is us as leaders of young people, we can help these young people generate really long-lasting memories and have really meaningful experiences in these outdoors. Many of us, our best memories of childhood are out in the outdoors and using these outdoor spaces. And it's absolutely fantastic to be able to give these, experiences back to young people that you are working with. Now, one of the biggest barriers that we can often find when we are, starting in outdoor learning is choosing these locations to use. And it can be quite hard to get your mind into. There's loads of different tools that are available to you and you can use to help find these locations. Now, one of the first suggestions is that it actually sounds quite obvious, but it is just to use maps and to look at maps for any areas that you're thinking about going. Because not only do they give you kind of ideas of, maybe green spaces or monuments or, open areas, they also give you loads of ideas about the facilities that that location might have as well, which are, equally as important when you're planning an outdoor learning session. So if you're looking at a map and you found a good location that you think you might want to use, using that map, you can also check, what kind of roads lead to that area. Is there any parking available? Are there toilets available? Is there, a small town nearby that you can maybe use for, a cafe stop or something like that? Maps can be a really good starting point to give you a location that you think might be worthwhile, and then you can go on and do more research. So really don't forget to look at maps when you're choosing a space or looking for a space. Second, one of the really good things that you can potentially use is the internet and online resources as well. There's a huge host of resources out there. One of my personal favourites is a website called walkhighlands.com, and it's an incredible website that has basically every type of walk that you could possibly imagine in Scotland uploaded to that website. So it has everything from, a 1 kilometre stroll around the local pond up to, the tallest Munro or multi-day walk. And there's loads of stuff out there, and it has them all split up into regions as well. So you can look at particular regions, particular areas that you want to go to. And it's got loads of information about the walk and about the area as well. So it has, directions, it has maps that you can download, it has information about the terrain and the elevation, but it also has information about the facilities as well. So whether there's parking, public transport, toilets, that sort of thing as well. So walkhighlands.com, absolutely a useful website to use. As well as websites, though, it's definitely worth bearing in mind that social media is a fantastic place to get inspiration for outdoor locations. Loads of people love to share their outdoor experiences on social media, and many of them will use hashtags to share those locations. Now, there's a whole range of different hashtags out there. Some of my personal favourites are hashtag Visit Scotland and hashtag Hidden Scotland. And what you can do with those hashtags in any of your chosen social media, you can search those hashtags and see what other people have shared using that hashtag. Now, quite often, the first places that will come up when you search for those hashtags will be, a far remote island or, the far mountain of Skye that aren't very accessible. But once you start to scroll through a little bit more, you will find fantastic locations that could be potentially close to you and that can be really good for outdoor learning as well. So don't forget to use the hashtags. And then finally, the last thing, which sounds really obvious, but is so beneficial, is just actually going out for yourself and just looking at the location and wandering around and just, having a bit of explore for yourself and seeing what's out there. Now, this might have been something you've already done quite a bit of in lockdown. You might have discovered more places around your area, but it really is so worthwhile, not only to find more about the area itself, but also just to give your mind, a little bit of rest, make sure you have a little bit more confidence about that area, so you know what to expect if you're potentially going to be bringing out young people. So this session, we're going to be looking at a range of different activities to help young people sort of connect with, learn about an environment and explore it a little bit more. But they can be translated or used in any environment of your choosing. So they're really, really versatile, which is one of the key things behind these activities. Just use them wherever you like in any area that you have close to you. Now, if you joined us yesterday, you'll remember our little quiz that we did. So I've got another quiz for you this time. We like to try and make things a bit interactive and just get you in the right headspace for the topic that we're talking about. So this quiz is called Where Is That? So I'm going to be showing you in a moment a series of pictures of different locations around Scotland that could be fantastic for outdoor learning. Now, these locations are not far off in the middle of nowhere, and they are accessible people in large cities, and they are hopefully areas that you'll be familiar with as well. But I'll show you the picture, and I'll give you about 10 seconds or so, and then after that, I will reveal the answer. Okay, so we'll start off with our very first one. Here we go. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, quite an iconic beach we have here. So this is West Sands. Oh, whoopsies. Sorry, wind in Scotland. This is West Sands Beach in St Andrews. So quite a big town itself, also very close to the likes of Dundee and surrounding areas of Fife. Beautiful location, really worthwhile for outdoor learning. So this next one might be a little bit tricky. It's hard to get a good photo to show the individual spot, but it's a forest kind of on a beach, close to a beach. I've got 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is a little bit tricky, this one, but it is Tentsmuir Forest. Again, very close to Dundee. Beautiful location there, lovely big forest on the beach. You've almost got 2 different locations in one that you can get by going there. Next one, hopefully everyone manages to get this one. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so this is in the middle of our capital city. This is Arthur Seat in Edinburgh. Beautiful hill, beautiful wild space, literally right in the heart of our capital city. So there we have. Got 2 more to go. Oops, upside down. There we are. This one here, bit of an iconic spot. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so this is just generically Loch Lomond. It's Millerrocky Bay if we're being very particular, but Loch Lomond, very, very close to the likes of Glasgow, very close to Stirling, and there's so many different spots around Loch Lomond that are fantastic to use for outdoor learning, whether it's just on the loch side or they're up in the hills, absolutely beautiful. And then we have our final one. Oops, I put it the right way around. Again, very iconic, right in the middle of our cities. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There we go. So here we have the River Kelvin, or Kelvin Grove, or University of Glasgow, whatever you want to put down. Beautiful, beautiful spots. Loads of lovely spaces around the river. Actually, recently been otters sighted in the River Kelvin, kingfishers, all sorts of life going on there. Fantastic spot for outdoor learning. So hopefully we got on with that okay. I'm now going to introduce our main session. So that's learning, World on our Doorstep. So this video will last for about 25 minutes or so long, and you'll then be brought back to me live again, and where I'll be answering some of those questions. So if you do have any questions, any point during the video, please do email them on to that email address. So that is questions@field-studies-council.org. We'll be happy to answer them at the end of the session. But for now, here we have the video. Hope you enjoy. It really is true that any outdoor space can be engaging and stimulating for outdoor learning with young people. Sometimes we think we know our local spaces really, really well, but I can guarantee you there will be excellent locations close to where you are that you might have never considered for outdoor learning before that could be really, really excellent to use. It really is worth thinking about, and maybe even looking at a map to see what you have around your area. Do you have a canal, a river, hills, park, woodland, a beach, anything at all? All of these spaces and urban environments as well can be really amazing for outdoor learning. There really is no limits. Outdoor learning is also not restricted to only natural settings. You can do it in built-up areas as well. We have a wealth of history and culture in Scotland, and monuments and buildings and castles galore. What better location to learn about, a historical event or figure or well-known person than, the location themselves that they actually used or lived in or grew up in. There are a whole host of activities that can help young people connect with and learn about a particular location that you're wanting to use. And we're going to cover a huge range of different activities in this session. So we're going to be looking at quite a few short sort of activities that you can almost have in your rucksack in a way for any activity or any location that you go to. But we're also going to consider navigational skills. So we're going to look at map reading, orienteering as well. So the first skill we're going to look at is map reading. Now, giving young people the tools to be able to read and interpret maps is really, really beneficial to them, because not only will it allow them to learn more about one particular location or, a large location as well, maybe a whole country, it also gives them a sense of place. So for young people in particular, if they're travelling to a new location that they've never been to before, it can make them potentially a little bit nervous. However, if they've maybe seen a map in advance and can kind of see what features that area has, what areas it's close to that they maybe are more familiar with, it just kind of gives them a little bit more relief and a little bit more kind of calming feeling about that location or that activity. And then of course, being able to read a map is just a really useful skill, so it gives them that as well. So the National Mapping System for the whole of the UK is Ordnance Survey, or OS, and they are absolutely the maps that we recommend to use for any sort of outdoor pursuits. They're nice and straightforward to use. They use the same key, and it's nice and straightforward again to understand. And also, it's the same mapping system for the entirety of the UK. So if you can read an OS map for the centre of Glasgow, you can also use an OS map to navigate on Skye as well. So you can purchase OS maps online or in a lot of bookstores or outdoor shops as well. However, there are ways for you potentially to access those resources online as well through a website called Digimaps. So Digimaps, for schools especially, has been set up by the University of Edinburgh, and it means you can access OS maps online, you can download them, and you can make printable copies of them as well. And what's really cool with Digimaps is that for some areas it goes back in time as well, so you can get maps dated back to potentially hundreds of years. We can get maps from the 1800s for this area, and it really just depends on what age of map has been digitised for the area you're trying to look at. Now, normally it's a paid resource. However, up until 31st of July, they have an offer on where you can download, or you can get a membership to Digimaps as a school or educational facility until the 31st of July. So if you think you might use any form of map with your young people, get in before that date. So maps date back to around 2300 BC, and despite growing technology, they're absolutely not going anywhere. They've been woven into our art and history and literature throughout the years. So for young students, it's really easy to differentiate map reading skills by focusing on key features that you see on the map. So things like water and buildings and roads. Whereas for older students, again, you can differentiate by looking at more technical skills. So taking grid references and using scale bars and things like that. The other really nice thing that you can use with young students is you can think about making maps for themselves, but maybe of imagined places, things that places that they've come up with themselves, or maybe places that they've read about and have in some of their favourite books. There's three key things to think about when it comes to reading maps: the key, the scale, and your orientation. So the key is essentially like a little mini translator that you can find in any map, and it essentially just tells you what all the different symbols, colours and patterns mean on your map. So for OS maps, again, they use the same key for every single map. So roads tend to be kind of thick coloured lines, and the thickness and the colour changes depending on the size of the road. Things that are of interest to tourists tend to be highlighted in blue, in that bright blue colour. So it could be things like facilities, which are quite useful when it comes to planning a session. So things like parking, toilets, cafes, tourist centres, all that sort of thing. Paths tend to be dashed lines. A single dashed line is a footpath. However, things like kind of national pathways, so like the West Highland Way, Fife Coastal Trail, they'll have their own special sort of path symbol. But a footpath is really important to know about. And things like walls and fences are just a clear black line. Now, the good thing is you don't have to remember all the different symbols because they are present on the key, but knowing a few key ones and knowing a few kind of popular ones can be really, really helpful. And there's some really good fun games that you can use with young students or with young people to help them remember certain symbols. So a little bit of symbol bingo is always a good one to go. But there's also an option for mapping wrapping that some of our centres use. So essentially all you have to do is come up with a little rhyming phrase to describe one of the symbols, and your young people have to guess what it is. So for example, if you wanted to describe a picnic site, you could say something along the lines of, you know, got my lunch, flew a kite at the picnic site, and that was what they would have to kind of come up with and follow on from. So it just makes it a little bit more engaging, a little bit more interesting, but developing a useful skill. So the next thing to consider then is your scale. Now, OS maps tend to use two types of scales commonly, 1 to 25,000 and 1 to 50,000. And essentially what that means is, for the 25,000 scale, something on your map is 25 times smaller than what it is in real life. And the same thing the other way around, just for 50 times 1,000. So the scale can always be found at the bottom of the map. So you can see that you've got the scale there, so 1 to 25,000. And you've also got this scale bar here. So the scale bar helps you work out certain distances along your map. Because as you can see, we've got our map split up into grid lines here, and we'll look a little bit more closely at grid lines in a little minute. But this bar has increments on it that correspond to these grid lines to show you how wide a square is on your grid lines. So for a 1 to 25,000, we can consult our scale bar, and we can see that each square made up by our grid lines corresponds to 1 kilometre in real life. So that's a really useful skill to use when you're walking or when you're out and about using a map, when you're trying to get to know a new place. But equally, you can see there with scale maps and things, or scale bars and things like that, you can easily bring in numeracy skills for any of your students. So the final thing to consider after you've thought about your key and your scale is to think about your orientation when you actually want to use a map to navigate. Now, there's a really simple technique you can use called setting your map, which essentially tries to place the objects that you can see on your map and the objects you can see in real life in the same sort of position. So to be able to set your map correctly, you need to find a key feature, a large prominent feature that you can see in real life, but you can also see on your map. So it can be a huge variety of different things depending on where you are. So it could be a building, a field, a hill, whatever you like. For us at Millport, we always pretty much know where the sea is, so that's what we tend to use. So I can see the sea is straight ahead of me right now. But when I look at my map, kind of the way it's meant to be, you know, with the title at the top, the sea to me is in this bottom right corner, so it's not in the same position as it is in real life to me as it is on my map. So to set my map, all I have to do is I have to stay still, but I then twist the map itself. So I want to twist the sea, my feature, to be in the same position or in the same relative position as it is to me in real life and it is on the map. So at the moment I've now twisted my map so that the sea is straight ahead of me, and that means that when I look down at the map I can see everything is in relation to me and I know exactly I can follow that. And as you walk around you continue to set the map and always have things in relation to where you are in real life. We have a really great activity for using, particularly with young students, but it works really nicely for older ones as well, to get them thinking about what a map is and how they might go about using one. So it starts off really simple. You need to choose a location, it can be inside, can be outside, but a relatively small location. Give them a bit of scrap paper and ask them to draw a map of that area that they are in. Give them a fairly limited amount of time to do it, only a couple of minutes, and they can, give them very little instruction, just let them have at it and do what they like. Most of them will remember that it is sort of a bird's eye perspective, but after a couple of minutes of them drawing their map, you then have to stop. They have to then mark a point on their map that they know in real life, and they have to, they think about it in real life, but then they have to draw where they think it is on their map. They then swap maps with another person in the group, and the other person has to then use their map, the other person's map, to try and find that location. So they've just got to use their map to walk along to get to that point. Now, the first time you do it, the chances are there's probably going to be a few discrepancies, you know, where someone thought their point wasn't quite where they thought they put it on their map, or someone's not quite read the map properly. And you can take it in lots of stages, and you can add more levels of detail to the maps as you go. You can add things like your key, add things like a scale, and it just kind of builds up that skill in reading the map and creating the map in itself. Because when you can create a map, you're going to have a much better understanding for how to read it, and it's just a little bit of fun as well. So once you've developed some map reading skills with your young people, it's time to put them to the test and have a little go with orienteering. So orienteering is all about being able to use map and other navigational skills to find certain locations. And you need to be able to prove that you've been to those locations, and different orienteering courses do it in different ways. So traditional kind of competitive orienteering, at each location that someone has to go to, there would be a stamp that they would have to use, and each location would have a slightly different stamp, but they would have to stamp a bit of paper which would have a particular number of spokes, or a particular pattern of spokes, and that would prove that they've been to that location. But if you're making your own orienteering course, you can do whatever you want. You could do different pictures or different facts that they would have to remember and bring back to you. So we're going to look at a couple of different ways that you could develop your own orienteering course for your young people. So this type of course I'm going to talk to you about is something we like to call star orienteering, and particularly works really well for younger students. However, we have also had plenty of adults running around enjoying it as well, so take that with a pinch of salt. But the star orienteering course, we have it set up around our centre, so in a fairly enclosed space, and they have 20 points to get to in a certain time frame, because one of the biggest things with orienteering is that it's a competition, it's a race. So we try and have it done in a limited time. Now, how it works is the thing that they have to find at each point is not a stamp or a picture. It's an answer to a question, okay? So each point that they have to go to, the number on that point corresponds to a particular question that we've developed, okay? Now, our questions have, a whole range of different topics, but most of them all are around sort of natural history or sustainability or biology of the animals around the centre, things that we want them to learn while they're staying with us. But you could make it literally whatever topic you wanted. So they're given a question. So if I gave them question 18, that would mean that they have to find point 18 on their map, go to it. At that point, there would be a board with the answer to the question on it. They have to read that answer, remember it, and then come back to me, tell me the answer, and if they get it correct, they get a new question. So that is how they work their way through the course, answering the different questions as they go. So not only is this a really engaging, fun activity that kind of benefits their health and well-being because they're being active and running around, it also is incredible for them retaining the knowledge that they have, collected as they go around the course. So, we've done the questions to be what we want them to be, but you can do them for anything you want. And trust me, they absolutely remember them. I do quite like to quiz them as we go through the week when a group of young people are out with us. And they get them hands down. They absolutely remember them. And it's really quite nice to see the teamwork as well between different students as they work their way through it. Now, of course, if you're doing this in your own land or your own space, then you can create these boards, these answer boards, and leave them outside permanently and not have to consider moving them. The only thing is, if you're using, private land or someone else's land or a public park, you probably can't rely on leaving them out and that they'll still be there the next time you want to use them. So it would require a little bit of planning on your part to then go and put the different points out, which can be done. And again, you could reduce the number. You don't have to do 20, you could do 10 to reduce the time it takes you to lay them all out. Now, as I said, this activity just in itself can be a really good one, particularly for young students, but also older ones as well. However, if you do want to kind of up the ante a little bit for your older students, you can make it more complex. You can make the area a lot larger, and also you could potentially include more age-related activities. So not simply relying on map navigation for finding the point, you could also include skills like taking grid references and taking bearings. So how this would work is that you would give your students a map, and but this map would include grid lines on it and grid references. So the instructions for how to get to certain points could be different. Some points could be just go to this location, but some things could be go to a grid reference and find a feature within that grid reference. So how we go about taking a grid reference, you consult your map. Where was my point? There we go. You consult your map. We've got these vertical and horizontal grid lines, okay? And you've also got numbers that correspond to the different lines. To start off with, we start at the bottom of our map. So you might have a grid reference that you know you want to find the square for, or you might want to find the grid reference for a particular square. So we'll start off with, this is how you find a grid reference for a particular square. So if you know that you wanted to hide a point, say in this square here, start off at the bottom and run your finger along until you have got to the bottom left corner of your chosen column that your square is in. So that number there is 23, so you'd write that down first of all as the beginning of your grid reference. Then what you can do is work your way up until again you are at the bottom left corner of your chosen square. So again, there's a number that corresponds to that line. For me, that's 43. So I would write that down immediately after my 23. And that there is my 4-figure grid reference, 2343 for that square. So as well as taking a grid reference, you could also incorporate using a compass and knowing how to take a bearing, which is a really useful skill again for older students. So compasses are not very expensive. You can get them on Amazon. I think it's for like, you get 3 for a tenner or something like that. There's a few key parts to a compass just to be aware of. So you've got a twisty dial here, and that's called a bezel, but we'll just call it a dial. Normally have a sort of string that you can latch it onto your wrist. And then the key parts in the middle, you can see you've got your north needle here. So that's the red needle, and that will spin around, or it will always stay in one location, even if you spin your compass around. Compasses only tend to work properly when they're completely flat. So when it's tilted up like that, it won't give you an accurate reading. You need to always be flat. The other feature is, as well as the dial itself can spin, and inside the dial you've got this red arrow outline, and this is an important feature for taking a bearing. So when you want to take a bearing, when you're using a map to do it, you need to know your start and your end point, and you write those down on your map. You can draw a little circle around them, or you just pick a key feature on that map. So I'm going to use, let's see, I'm going to use the junction of this road here and the junction of that road. So I want to take a bearing between those two junctions. First thing I have to do is I have to use the edge of my compass to join up those 2 points. So I have to run it alongside, almost like I was taking a measurement with a ruler. Okay. So once you've done that, hold that in place, you then need to twist your dial so that the lines inside your dial are running parallel with the vertical lines on your map. So I'm going to twist them round. Now you need to make sure that you're twisting them around in this right direction to make that red outline arrow facing upwards. So it needs to be facing in the same direction north as your map is. And so maps are always drawn to be facing north. So twist that around. You can then lift your compass off your map, hold it out straight in front of you. Now you don't have to twist the dial around anymore. You have to keep that dial nice and still, but you have to move your own body. So you've got the red needle there, and what you have to do is twist your body round, almost like it's on sort of an axis, and you have to wait until that north needle goes inside the red arrow. So it'll take a little bit of twisting and figuring out, but right now that is where I have my needle inside my red arrow. So that means I'm facing the correct bearing. And if I want to walk along that bearing, I just have to walk in a straight line. But I have to keep checking my compass to make sure that the needle is staying inside that red arrow. So in the same way as grid references, you could incorporate taking a bearing into a complicated way or a more complex way of identifying a point during orienteering. So you would have a simple instruction like go to this point maybe on a map and then take a bearing and walk 50 metres in this direction. And again, it also then allows them to think about the directions of a map, so north, east, south and west. So it's just adding that extra layer of complexity and just empowering the students a little bit more and letting them take control of their own learning. So it involves a really fun experience because orienteering is just fun and competitive in itself, but it's also incorporating so many additional extra skills like map reading that are not only kind of useful to have in terms of schooling and curriculum for excellence, it's also just useful to have for general life. So as well as being able to map read for certain locations, potentially creating orienteering courses in your chosen location, there's loads of little activities you can do, in the middle of any outdoor learning session or that you can make as a session themselves, just to help create a sense of place for young people and also just to help them form a better connection with the area that they're in. So one mini activity that I particularly love is a sort of partner activity, and it's called Human Camera. So in their partner, each person takes a turn to be a camera and the photographer. So the camera has to close their eyes to start off with, and the photographer then has to take them gently by the shoulders and move them to a location or move them to a nice view that they see. Once they've got them in that location, they have to gently tap on their head, almost like they would be pressing the shutter on a camera. The camera person then opens their eyes and they have to look at their view and try and take in as many details as possible, because after 10 seconds the photographer is then going to tap them on the head again and they will have to close their eyes. So once they've done that, they then have to go off to a separate location, bit of paper, and they have to draw everything that they can remember from their chosen view, and they can add as much detail to it as they can remember, as much as they like, and they can spend as much time on it as they like as well. It can be a 5-minute activity, or it could be an hour-long activity where they can colour it in and decorate it, and that in itself is just a really nice activity for them to become aware of their surroundings and think more about the area that they're in. But the best part is, on the other side of the paper, they can almost make a little postcard and they can write a story about what they've learned that day, what they've seen that day, and if you're maybe off in a different location, they could send it home, or it's just something that they can keep for themselves as a memento from that experience. Another really nice mini activity that can work alongside a walk or maybe a visit to a new location is to create something called a journey stick. So at the beginning of the walk or at the beginning of the location, a student has to find themselves a stick, but not ideally a long one. But then as they walk along, they have to collect different things that they find along their journey and attach them to the journey stick. So normally it involves some form of string or something like that, so you need to be a little bit prepared for that. But it's really lovely because by the end of their journey, they'll have all these different materials and all these different things that they'll have added to their stick. And hopefully the idea is that they learn something about the different things as they go along. So they might have collected something like a feather from a bird that they've found, or a particular type of leaf, or an interesting pebble, or anything at all. They can collect that and add that to their stick, and then again they've got a lasting memento from that occasion. So another activity that you could do at any location is environmental art, and this is a really nice kind of health and well-being, chill out, calming activity that you can literally do anywhere. So environmental art or sculptures is just basically using the natural materials that young people find in the location and creating some kind of artwork out of it. There are some incredible patterns and colours, and there's so much creative inspiration to come from nature, and it can be a really nice activity again for a 10-minute quick activity, or it can be built up to a much longer term project.
If you want inspiration for some really incredible sort of natural art or environmental art, look no further than Andy Goldsworth. So a couple of pictures will be up on the video just now, but he has only created art using sort of natural or outdoor influences. So he does them in natural landscapes and in urban as well, and just spends loads of time sort of creating these beautiful pieces of art and sculptures using only natural materials that he finds out and about. So if you need a little bit of inspiration, there's a good one to go for. So one final little mini activity that we like to recommend, because we use it all the time, is by doing some sort of scavenger hunt with your students in a particular location. And you can do a whole range of different things. So one of the scavenger hunts that we use it particularly on the rocky shore, and students have to find different objects that corresponds to different categories. So they have to find something that's smooth, something that's rough, something that's more than 1,000 years old, something that's been alive, and something they think is a treasure. So they can spend a couple of minutes just getting to explore the area and find these things that they think represent those different categories. But you can use a whole range of different things. You can target individual senses for a scavenger hunt. So for example, they have to find 5 different smells, or for sounds they have to hear identify 5 different natural sounds, maybe a bird, wind rustling in the leaves, something like that. And the other thing you can focus on, which often we kind of don't really think about as being one of our predominant senses, is touch and feeling things. So again, closing their eyes, they can look for 5 different sort of natural textures, and just that sort of touching and connection with nature just provides an extra level of sort of connection to the environment that they're in. So there we have it. There's a range of sort of backpacks, mini activities that you can have with you and use whenever you like, as well as sort of more long-term, place setting, map reading, or orienteering activities as well. All really straightforward and engaging and interesting, but also skill developing for young people in the outdoors.
Okay, so there we have it. It's even more straightforward and engaging activities you can do with your young people in the outdoors. The best thing is that these activities can be done in literally any location of your choosing. So I'll be answering questions live in just a moment. So if you do have any questions now from that session, you've still got time to email them over. And that email address is questions@field-studies-council.org. So please feel free to send them over if you'd like any of them answered at the end. Now, one of the first barriers, or one of the first kind of problems that we can find when you're just getting into outdoor learning, one of the worries that you might have is that you don't have enough activities or contingency plans in place for your outdoor session. And this is where some of these activities, particularly those short little mini activities that we had at the end of the session there, can be incredibly helpful. So many of our tutors across our centres have a little pack that we've made up of these mini activities and more as well that we carry around in our rucksacks when we're out and about doing our outdoor sessions. And it just means that if something doesn't quite go to plan, or if you need something else to do with your young people, if you need to excite them a little bit, or if you need to calm them down, you can whap out any of these mini activities and use them at any time or location and for any length of time as well. Now, it's also worth bearing in mind that, don't forget, you can take quiet time with young people as well in any given location. Sometimes just the permission to, sit back, reflect, listen to the sounds that they hear in their environment, smell what's going on, and just getting in touch with them just as beneficial for young people as running around and doing something active. Permission to just have some quiet reflection time can be, as I said, just as beneficial as moving around. So let's look at some of the online, and those things that happen in the outdoors while we're out and about. Anyway, we'll talk more about Minibeasts tomorrow. I just wanted to get there. Let's look at some of the online resources that you can use that relate to this topic. So there's loads of different ones out there. One of the best websites that we found for resources for things like map reading and navigation is the Ordnance Survey website. So if you go onto that website and look in the education section, you'll find a whole range of different guides for how to read maps, how to take bearings, how to take grid references, and how to use them with young people. But they also have a really cool app as well called OS Locate that you can use when you're out and about in different locations, and you can find out more information about the spot that you're in. So things like latitude and longitude and which is really useful. So definitely check out the Ordnance Survey map. Other places you can go to, the Learning Outside the Classroom website is a huge website with so many different resources that is really, really valuable. Some of the most useful things that they have on that is they have guides how to write risk assessments and guides for how to plan outdoor sessions. But they also have a huge range of activity ideas as well, some of the mini activities that we talked about in that session. The last one I'll mention in this video is that we also have the Countryside Classroom website. Is again also really good. It's a huge website that has loads of different things, but it is also particularly useful for activity ideas and mini activities and things like that. And all those links are available on the Padlet website, which I'll talk about again in just a minute. So I think that brings us along really nicely to our questions. So Lorraine, would you like to give me some questions?
So our first one is, what other safety equipment should you take with you to an outside location?
Okay, that's a good one. So if you didn't hear that, our first question is, what safety equipment would you be bringing into an outdoor learning location? And this is a little bit varied, obviously, depending on what location you are going to. There are three things that we as tutors, when we go out in the outdoors, that we always have with us. The first is pretty obvious, it's a mobile phone, or a way to contact our centre, emergency services, or our students that we're out and about with. A mobile phone, some form of contact is absolutely essential. The other thing that we have with us, of course, maybe quite obvious, is our first aid kit. So we always have a first aid kit that's packed with bandages, plasters, all your basic things that you would have in your normal first aid kit. And then lastly, we have what we call SWICs. So we have little risk assessments and kind of location cards for our locations that we choose to visit. Little location cards that can be used by students as well, in a serious emergency, if the outdoor leader that they're out and about with maybe has an accident and they can't take control of the situation, the cards are still there and able to use for the young people. So they have essential information like the closest dwelling to the location that you're in. They have a grid reference, if you need to phone emergency services. They have little instructions for what to do in case of an emergency, and just loads of other bits of information about the site that you would need to know in the event of an emergency. And they've got a mini risk assessment for that site as well. So those are the three things that we have wherever we go to, at any location. And then depending on the activity, depending on the location, we might have other things. So for us at Millport, where we're working predominantly by the coast and by potentially freshwater sites, we always carry a throw line with us, and we actually talk about throw lines in a little bit more detail later on in our coastal video. But for people that maybe are centres or tutors that work maybe in more remote locations, maybe up hills and things, they might have things like shelters and bivy bags and potentially tarps and things as well. So it's a little bit down to the location that you're in. But I would say a phone, a first aid kit, and location information is absolutely essential. Good question.
Other than question and answer boards, what else could you use as orienteering posts?
Okay, cool. So for orienteering, that question was, what other things, other than just question and answer boards like you saw with Star Orienteering, what else could you use potentially as markers for your orienteering course? This is the nice thing, because this is, where your creativity can, be let loose. There's loads of different suggestions. We quite like the Star Orienteering, because it allows, extra learning for a different topic. But the other things that you can do, you could just have, different pictures. So classic orienteering, as mentioned in that video, is different stamping patterns. Now, you might not have stamps available, but all you need is a unique thing, I suppose, at each location that they have to find and remember so that they can prove that they've been to that location. So for one of our orienteering courses, we've made little posts, and on each of the posts is a different picture of a marine creature there that they have to remember and take notes of, so we know that we've been to that spot. There's a whole variety of different things. Actually, when we were making this video, talking to one of my colleagues, she remembered an orienteering experience that she'd had when she was younger, when they were learning about pigs and how the pigs were used to find truffles. And they were learning about that whole side of history. And so their leader developed an orienteering course where they had to look for truffles. And they got Ferrero Rochers at the end of it. But that was how their orienteering courses developed, and it had this whole element of history lesson as well incorporated into the orienteering. So not only did they learn the orienteering navigational skills, they also learned about this whole historical kind of figure and this whole historical era, and they also got chocolate out of it, and she absolutely remembers it. So there's loads and loads of different things you can do, and it's absolutely a chance to let your creativity flow. All right, got another one?
What essential facilities do you think an outdoor learning space should have?
Okay, so that question there was another kind of safety one. Is what potential facilities do you think should be found in an outdoor learning space that you choose? Again, there's loads of kind of different facilities that you would like an ideal place to have. I guess the essential ones, first thing is toilets. Toilets and hand washing is absolutely essential for an area, particularly depending on the age group you're with. I mean, you know, as long as there's bushes and things potentially, if you've got a type of group that is maybe adventurous, you know, if they don't mind a little nature wee here and there, that could be fine. But absolutely toilets, I would say, are really, really essential for most groups that you're out and about with. In terms of practicalities, things like parking spaces and public transport, you know, you want to be able to safely access and leave your site again is really important. And other facilities, shelter really is also quite important because you never quite know what weather you're going to have on an outdoor learning day. And I'm absolutely an advocate for, even if it's raining, you can still carry on as long as it's not, you know, compromising safety. And this is again something we talk about in our kind of coastal day. As long as it's not compromising safety, you can still get out and about on a wet day. You just have to maybe bear in mind that you want some form of shelter there as well. And that can be anything from a bus shelter to, you know, a forested area. It can be anything, but toilets, some form of shelter, and you know, some form of parking or, you know, access that means you can get there and get out nice and easily. Okay.
And final question, are there any specific activities you can do in built up or historic settings?
Okay, so our final question there I think we've got is, are there any specific activities that you would recommend for historic or built up areas? So I think one potential activity that would be really good for a historic location particularly is a scavenger hunt. So scavenger hunts can be, you know, adapted to a whole range of different environments and different activities, and it just involves them kind of getting to grips with their location a little bit more and finding out things. So our scavenger hunt that I think mentioned in this video is, you know, people have to go out and look for something old or something that's been alive, or, you know, something that they think is a treasure. Those are some of the characteristics that we have. But if it's an historical location, you could make a scavenger hunt where they have to go around and find different facts or different artifacts or different areas of that historic location, and then maybe learn something about it. Maybe they have to go to that location, find it, read about it, and remember a particular fact or figure about it, and then come back. And that's the purpose of their scavenger hunt. That makes it a little bit more interesting. In terms of built up areas, you can absolutely do sort of little mini investigations into their place. You can find out things about their town and maybe compare it with another town. So things like questionnaires, you know, or interviews with local people to find out kind of maybe where they've come from, what their jobs are, things like that, where they can almost get a sort of demographic of a location. And then also things like, you know, pedestrian counts and traffic counts and looking for green spaces. You know, it can give them a little mini picture of their location, and then they can potentially compare with another one as well. So yeah, there really are no limits, even if you're in an built urban or built up environment. That's a really good question. So I think that's probably out of time now. Yeah, I think we're out of time now for questions. So we'll just get round to rounding up. Now, if you joined our session yesterday, you'll know that I set you a little bit of homework, and that's going to be the same for each session. So every session, you're going to be given a little bit of homework by me, and that myself and your colleagues at Barnardos would really like for you to carry out. So our homework task for this day, we would like you to develop your own orienteering course in your local space that you might want to use with young people. Now, it can be as creative as you like. If you want to get some Ferrero Rochers in there, now you've got some inspiration. You can do it whatever you like. You can use you know, just map reading skills. You can incorporate bearings or grid reference takings if you'd like. But you can do whatever you like. But we'd like you to develop your own orienteering course for your local space that you might want to use with young people. So that's your homework. Now, you can upload your progress of your homework to our Padlet website. The Padlet website, the link is in the description to this video, and it has all the resources that we've talked about in this session and yesterday's session, as well as future sessions as well. There's loads of resources and things you can access to facilitate your outdoor learning, but it's also where you can upload your progress. I would really like to see what you guys come up with, and it's also really beneficial for you guys to share your own learning as well. So please do upload your progress up to that website. But that is us pretty much finished for today now, and thank you very much. I really, really hope that you've enjoyed this session and that you've got even more ideas now to hopefully use with your young people. I'll be seeing you guys at the same time again tomorrow morning, so 10:30 we'll be getting into our third session, which is hunting for Minibeasts. We're going to be looking at all the different session ideas that you might develop around insects in your local space. So I'll see you then at 10:30 tomorrow morning. But for now, thank you very much.